Hello and welcome to Fork in the Road. My name is Rusty Gaylord. I am your host. Fork in the Road is a conversation with interesting, successful people about the forks in the road that they have encountered, the changes in life, the decisions that they've had to make that help them get to where they are in their life today. So today I am very excited to have Karan Nigam with us today. And Karan is the Senior Director of Marketing at Palo Alto Networks. He's had a fascinating career. We're going to get into some of that in our conversation. So without further ado, I will bring him on. So Karan, good to see you.
Good to see you, Rusty, and hi, everyone. Lovely to be here.
All right. Well, hey, let's jump in because one of the first things that you told me, which I found was fascinating, was your boss in your very first job came to you at one point and said, you're not very good at your job. And
Yeah,
most
yeah,
of us would be pretty afraid about that, but that turned into a good thing for you. So I'd love to hear you share a little bit about that story.
yeah. Before I jump into that, let me just say I've found the concept of fork in the road super fascinating. So I'm excited to be here. I think so much of our conversations are about perfections,
Hmm.
but we don't spend enough time talking about the changes and the forks in the road. So I'm excited to be here and share some of my learnings and experiences. Yeah, jumping into your question. Yeah, I mean, so I started my career as a software engineer. Clearly, wasn't very good at it. But my my manager at that time, he took me out for a walk one day, and in a very polite manner, shared this feedback that I'm not super great at what I do. Uh, and while it was a humbling moment, he also provided me more context of the fact that he sees me more energetic when I'm engaged in more sales and marketing sort of conversations versus actual product development. And that feedback cycle, that feedback loop itself became the very impetus for me to take the next step and come to US and do my master's in business. But yeah, it was definitely a tough, humbling moment. But sometimes, it's not about actually the real feedback as such. You don't have to take everything personally. It's more about if someone is giving you feedback, perspective, just paying attention to it for a minute. You may not agree with it, but paying attention to it can be a really helpful tactic. So definitely, I'm very very. I don't know where he is today, but wherever he is, I'm very thankful for his feedback at that point in time.
Well, what I love about that feedback is it's not just that you're not very good at your job, but the second part of that, which is I
Yeah,
notice where you come alive, where your energy goes up.
yeah,
And using that as a tool is just so useful to pay attention to where you're energized and what gives you energy and what takes away your energy, and using that to help you make decisions as you navigate. So
yeah.
I'm
I mean, I think in to your point, just building on that, Rusty, I think that in my head, that's the big difference between criticism and feedback.
hmm.
Criticism is you can just stop at you're not very good at your job, and feedback is you're not very good at your job. I feel like you can do this thing better. Feedback's always additive. It's always constructive in my head. So I think I'm very thankful that he took that approach with me.
Well, and I'm glad you brought that up because I was listening to something recently and they were distinguishing even between feedback and advice. And I
Ah,
love that idea because feedback does tend to be backward looking and advice tends
yeah,
to be forward looking.
yeah,
And what
yeah,
I heard in that example is there was a bit of advice. Maybe
yeah.
it wasn't framed this way, but do what energizes you. Find those
Exactly
things
right.
that give you energy and go there.
Yeah, I mean, I think that concept of what gives you energy in personal or professional, I think that very concept has stayed with me for all these years now. Every few months, I do a check-in with myself on, what I'm working on right now, what I'm spending most time on. Does that give me energy or not? So that's a very interesting and helpful lens to think about things.
Well, so I think that's interesting because I know you were at Nokia for a while. So give us a little bit of the arc of your time at Nokia, and
Yeah,
how does that relate to feeling energized if you're checking in periodically? Because you were there during the decline of what
yeah,
was a great company.
yeah, absolutely. I don't know what that says about me and my career, but yeah, I had a chance to experience that very interesting phase. Yeah, I mean, I think right after US, I had a chance to, join a couple of different opportunities in different companies. But because I grew up in India, I had this massive emotional affinity towards Nokia as a company, as a brand. It was a big part of my, childhood experience as well in India. So, I decided to, move to Helsinki, Finland, join Nokia, and that was exactly the time where the company was going through a massive transformation from moving away from the legacy business to the new business of competing with Androids and the new iOS platform, etc., in the market. And you know, even though those 4 years were incredibly tough from just where the business headed in the end, it also became the most learning rich experience for me. Just to give you context, in those 4 years, the company went from nearly 50,000 plus employees to nearly 2,500 employees. The company went from 70% market share to 10% market share. And these are dramatic, dramatic changes, right? But at the same time, um, I also got really interesting opportunities to work on big and bold projects, big and bold transformational projects, work with senior executives. And the thing that I really, a couple of things that really stood out for me in that experience was, um, the value of empathy. Empathy is a very widely used buzzword, but truly understanding what your customers are trying to experience, what are they trying to buy in, and what are you trying to sell, and what's the disconnect. Empathy with employees when you have all your colleagues getting laid off around you. It's not a very pleasant experience a lot of times. But how can you be empathetic, respectful of their situation, and help as much as possible in that time? And the second thing really was, I think that experience really helped me understand that you can be successful one day and not be successful the other day,
Mm.
and having that humility to be able to traverse that journey, I think was a great learning experience. And I still hold it very dearly till date. I think it grounded me as a person on not taking things for granted, not becoming bullish about your current situation for no reason as such.
Mhm.
So
Mhm. Well, I mean, you've had a, just even in what you've shared so far, right? To start off as a software engineer, to leave there, to move to the US, to go to
yeah,
business school, to then move to Nokia, to Finland.
yeah,
And
yeah,
then you go back to the US. I know, happen to
yeah,
know that afterwards. Um, eh, One of the things that you shared with me early on was that your mom wanted you to have a very clear plan for your life.
yeah,
And you've been all over the place, not in a bad way, but
yeah,
you've taken advantage of opportunities, and you've really followed, at those forks in the
yeah,
road. You've made decisions. So, how does that sit with you? How do you hold that flexibility of responding to what does give you energy and where you feel the desire to go next, in contrast with this desire, which comes from your family, of having a clear
yeah.
plan for where you're going?
Yeah, I mean, it's so interesting to talk about this because my mom is actually visiting me and she's actually with me. So, it's a very delightful topic, and she and I talk about it all the time as well. So, yeah, I mean, yeah, I did grow up with a very, very strong uh, personality as a mother, which I'm super thankful for. But she had this incredibly structured way of looking at life. She still does, and she had all these things laid out for me, and how my career should go, the kind of schools I should attend, the kind of education I should have, and the kind of job I should have, which is totally reasonable from her perspective.
Mhm.
But thankfully enough, and interestingly enough, life did not work out like that for me at all. I moved all over the place, and I think in the first few years I struggled to rationalize that what my reality was and what I thought my reality would be and should be. But lately I've really started to just enjoy the fact that we all enter a game with a certain plan, and then the game evolves. And
Mhm.
people who tend to, at least in my opinion, tend to do well in the long run are people who have the courage to be open-minded about the changes, evolve with the changes, and also just not take it too seriously. Planning is great. Don't take me wrong. Like I love and respect people who do a lot of planning. I still do it till date. But I also, every time I make a plan, I'm also very, very aware that 60% of this plan will probably not stick. And that's
Mhm.
fine. But at least now I have a framework on how to think about this problem statement, how to enter the opportunities. And just candidly speaking, the most interesting people I've met, the most interesting things that have happened to me were not a part of my plan. I did not know where Finland was on the global map, to be honest. I mean, I knew it where it was, but I didn't really know. And I spent 4 years in Helsinki, Finland. Some of my closest friends till date, some of the people I love the most till date, are still in Helsinki, Finland.
Mhm.
So I think just paying attention to what life has to offer can be helpful.
So how do you make those decisions? Like, how do you both know, sometimes there's natural transition points, right? You
Mm,
finish, you finish your schooling and there's a natural transition point onto the next job. But there's
Yeah.
also the times when it's not a natural transition point, right? You're in the middle of a job and you
Yeah.
decide this is time for me to step out and go move. So how do you think about those decision points, and how do you know for you when
Mhm.
is the right time to move?
Yeah. It's a very interesting question because I recently changed my jobs as well after 7, 8 years in Microsoft. It was a big decision, and that was one of the exact things that I didn't need to move, but I
Mhm.
think I wanted to move.
Mhm.
And there are two or three things I tend to pay attention to in such inflection points. Um, One is, um, am I in my current situation because I'm comfortable, or am I in my current situation because I love it? Because if the answer is you're just comfortable, you may want to consider changing.
Yeah.
You may not want to. It's like I'm one of those people I'm not very energized with status quo as such. So for me, I get my energy from new things, challenging things, bigger things, things I struggle with. So that's one, love or comfort. Second is, when I'm out with friends and family, um, am I still energized as a whole person? Because work is a big part of my whole life. Or am I, um, you know, grumpy, upset, negative around them? And I pay attention to those signals quite a lot. I think if a job becomes really stable and status quo sort of a thing for me, I tend to become a lot negative in my personal life. So I tend to pay attention to that. So I think that's a very big decision factor for me. And third really is, where is growth? I've decided as a person that I want to be part of growth stories, growth projects, growth people, growth personalities. So if my current job has limitation to how much growth it can offer to me in the short to midterm, then I tend to gravitate towards opportunities where growth is about to happen.
Hmm.
So yeah, that those are the two or three I think key factors.
Yeah, it's so interesting. One of the things I thought was really interesting is, am I energized or am I kind of grumpy? It was one of the words you
Yeah,
used.
yeah,
Outside of work, like so many of us
yeah,
think about how we are inside of work, but you're talking to, work impacts you. And
yeah,
you're all of us who spend so many waking hours a day working, our
yeah,
work is tied to how we see ourselves and our identity.
yeah,
And if
yeah,
you're not happy at work, then you're not going to be happy outside of work. And so I think it's fascinating that you're using that outside of work
yeah.
energy to reflect on, how is work feeding me or not feeding me?
Yeah, I mean, my wife and I have this weekend thing where every Saturday morning we spend 20-ish minutes just out for coffee and just do a check-in with each other. And she keeps me very honest. She gives me very good, honest feedback about how terrible I've been as a person lately. And if that happens a few times, then I have to start paying attention
Mm,
because work could be one of the aspects that is causing that. So I have to just pay attention to that on a constant basis.
yeah, fascinating.
Yeah, yeah,
Um, uh, One of the things that you talked about is you mentioned courage in there a little bit. The courage to make a move that's
yeah,
right for you. And you also talked about, are you comfortable in your job or are you in love with your job? I think
yeah,
those two things go well together, because it's easy to
yeah,
be comfortable. We all want to be comfortable, but it takes real courage to leave comfort to pursue love. And
yeah.
I'm curious how you think about that.
Yeah, I mean, I think first let me just say I don't have any problems with people who prefer comfort. It's
Oh,
a
sure.
perfectly reasonable thing to do. What I've realized is over time is personally for me, I don't really value comfort too much in my life as such. Like, I think I tend to be gravitating towards projects and people who are trying to do big and bold things.
Hmm.
Um, I think for me personally, the concept of courage is a very personal concept. Like, my even in my dad's or younger days, he went to Iran to spend some time there when Iran and Iraq war was going on, when he didn't need to. So I think I've received some of that agitation to try and do big things, new things in genes. Uh, but at the same time, I think for me, the fundamental question I've always asked myself is, I've taken a big life decision to be away from my family who are still back in India. So I've left my family back there. I've consciously taken a choice to not meet them for the majority of the year.
Hmm.
So now that I've taken that life decision, am I making the best of it?
Hmm.
And is the best of my life decision purely comfort, or is it that I'm always trying to do something more, something better, something more interesting? And to me, the answer is latter. So I think the courage is more about, um, it's not comfortable. It doesn't come to you naturally, but that's where the aspect of courage comes in. That can you push yourself intrinsically to try something new out, knowing that you might fail.
Yeah.
So yeah,
Karan, as you're talking about this, I see myself as also someone who's always wanting to grow and
yeah,
learn and expand. And one of the questions that I think about is when is enough enough? Right?
yeah.
Am I growing and trying to learn and expand because it's not good enough where I am?
Mm.
Am I content where I am and I'm very happy and I still like to have new experiences? So how do you think about that?
That's a great question. I don't think I've ever experienced a moment where I felt it's enough. I think I'm intrinsically very curious as a person. So I'm always trying to just gather new experiences. I'm fascinated by people with different life experiences, different kind of life trajectory. Like my wife is an architect; she designs schools. So I'm always asking her dumb questions about architecture because it's not like it's my job, but I'm just curious. Um, I do think, though, I think one of the reasons why I believe I'm like that is you're always on two axes as a person, whether you're a generalist or a specialist, and both of those things are right. What I've realized though is as the world around us has become a lot more complicated, technology and things around us are evolving at a much faster pace than ever before. I personally think people who tend to have general experiences across multiple kinds of problem statements, projects, are well established for the high pace future we're heading into. So for me, I think the idea of developing general frameworks that can work across multiple types of industries, multiple kind of jobs, different kind of problem statements, that's a very exciting idea for my own self. So that's the life decision I've taken. And
Mhm.
that just means that every 2 to 3 to 4 years, I have to change the job I'm in, or the company I'm in, or the kind of work I'm doing.
Mm.
And I'm sure at some point it will not just be about my professional experiences. In parallel, I think I've talked to you about this, Rusty. In parallel, I'm trying to become a better writer as well. At someday, I want to publish my own book. Um, I'm starting to develop a couple of other personal side habits as well. So maybe at some point, professional will just take a step back, and I'll focus on other things.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, so interesting. How do you know? One of the things is, as somebody who changes jobs and positions and is dynamic in the work environment, a lot of people who have a life like that prioritize that, and other
Mm,
parts of life fall off, right? Like, I don't
mm,
have time for my hobbies, for my interests, because I'm focused on my family and my work, and there's no time for anything else.
yeah.
Um, and yet here you are, you just said, hey, there's other things that are important to me. And I know we were talking earlier about how did all of these things intersect. So I'm wondering if you think about, as you think about growth and expansion for you as a person, which, work is certainly one
Yeah.
domain in which that happens, but now you're talking about other domains.
Yeah.
How do you have the energy to do all that?
Uh, yeah. I think I try to. It's tough. I struggle with it every day. So I think I tend to take on more things that I can actually do. I tend to buy more books than I can actually read. So I think that's just a constant pattern in my life. I've become okay with it. Um, I think in general, what I tend to do is anytime I start a new project or a hobby, I give my loved ones a heads up that, over the next couple of weeks, this is the kind of time I will not be able to give, or, I want to focus on this thing, so I need your support on this. Um, or if I'm trying to do a new job, I tend to surround myself with experts as coaches for the first few weeks as well, so that it makes my transition easier than me trying to figure out everything.
Mhm.
And third thing I think I've noticed is um, meditation tends to help me a lot. Like that's a tactical thing that I've spent a lot of time on lately. That anytime during transition, I amp up my meditation efforts because that tends to keep me calm, composed, and that helps. So those are some of the things that I've tried and has worked decently well so far.
Yeah, I love that. I just actually wrote a little piece of content based on something that my friend says to me oftentimes, which
Yeah.
is don't just do something, sit there.
Yeah,
Right?
I love that.
Playing on the phrase "don't just sit there, do something," right? But turning it
Yeah,
around, because there is so much value in finding that time where you can slow down and be
yeah,
present, calm yourself, and it allows you to
yeah,
bring the best of yourself when you go back out into the world, which is fast paced and busy and
yeah.
high demands and all of that.
Yeah, I do think though, like you're just building on that idea. I mean, I do think that I'm starting to become better at the time that I'm with my family or my
Mhm.
friends. I'm focused on them.
Mhm.
So even if it's 2 hours in the evening, it feels like 10 hours because the
Mhm.
quality of the experiences is so much high. I think in the past I've struggled where even if I'm when I'm with my family, I'm thinking about work. When I'm at work, I'm thinking about my family, and it just is never a productive mental state to be in.
Mhm.
So I've definitely tried to block off all the distractions when I'm with my family, or I'm doing something personal, as a hobby or something. I try to remove all the distractions, as much as possible.
Yeah. Yeah, be where you are.
Yeah, yeah. I mean,
Yeah.
it sounds super simple, but it's incredibly tough to do, in my opinion.
It is, and that's why I
Yeah,
think, as you talked about meditation really helping, especially when the
yeah,
demands on you ramp up. It can be a
yeah,
really helpful way to train your brain to be present.
yeah, yeah,
Yeah. I think it's such an interesting idea. Most of us kind of think, well, meditation, yeah, we'll go to the gym, we'll train our physical body, but what are you
yeah.
actually
Exactly.
doing to invest in training your brain, which it really is so much more
Yeah,
important in your day-to-day experience of life.
yeah. And I think I've struggled with getting good at it for many, many years. I'm still not amazing at it. But I think lately the thing that I realized is, just letting go for some time and not trying too hard for some time can also be an amazing pause. So
Mhm.
sometimes my meditation sessions are all about just literally not thinking about anything productive, and you're spending 5 minutes with just doing random, thinking, letting the thoughts flow in and out, and that
Mhm.
just gives me the right pause that I need. So, but I'm sure like everyone has a different practice and discipline there.
Yeah, no, I appreciate you sharing that one though, because it's useful. It's one I've tried too. It
Yeah,
doesn't. You may not even call it meditation, right? Because people think
yeah,
meditation has to be a particular way, but just to
yeah,
sit and let your thoughts flow through, and have
yeah,
some space to think and
yeah,
to be.
yeah,
Yeah, fantastic. Well, Karan, thank you so much for sharing about not only a little bit some of the forks in the road and the decisions you made, how you approach those, but then also some of the tools you use to navigate
yeah.
the multiple demands that we all have on our life. So, thank you for being here and sharing openly about your experience.
No, thank you. Thank you for having me. Thank you for the platform. And I hope something I said would be helpful to at least one person. So
Yeah.
I appreciate your time.
Well, if somebody wanted to reach out to you, are you open to connections on LinkedIn or messages or follow ups on this conversation?
Absolutely. I think LinkedIn is the platform of choice for me. I've moved away from all the other platforms largely. So please connect with me. Please reach out, and I'll try my absolute best to respond as soon as possible.
Great. Well, thank you again so much for being here.
Of course. Thank